Hello guys and gals, and this is going to be part 1 of our reading of Farmer Giles of Ham. And we read a little bit of it in the at the end of the last episode. Yeah. Okay. It says here, and I believe, with a little research, that this is Latin up here, and I can't begin to read it. I never learned Latin, but anyways, I believe this is Latin. Or in the vulgar tongue, the rise and wonderful adventures of Farmer Giles, Lord of Thame, Court of Worminghall, and King of the Little Kingdom. So we're going to find out how he became king, I guess. Let's get right on that. This does say, to C.E. Wilkinson. Okay. And we will start with the foreword. Of the history of the Little Kingdom, few fragments have survived, but by chance an account of its origins has been preserved. A legend, perhaps rather than an account, for it is evidently a late compilation, full of marvels derived not from sober annals, but from the popular lays to which its author frequently refers. For him, the events that he records lay already in a distant past, but he seems nonetheless to have lived himself in the lands of the Little Kingdom. Such geographical knowledge, as he shows, it is not a strong point, is of that country, while the regions outside of it, north or west, he is plainly ignorant. An excuse for presenting a translation of this curious tale out of its very insular Latin into the modern tongue of the United Kingdom may be found in the glimpse that it affords of life in a dark period of history of Britain. Not to mention, okay, so I was right, that was Latin. Wow, I didn't think I could recognize that. Okay, 66. Here we go. This book doesn't want to stay open. There we go. Okay, fighting the book. There we go. Fighting the book. Fighting the book. There we go. The light that it throws on the origin of some difficult place names. Some may find the characters and adventures of its heroes attractive in themselves. The boundaries of the Little Kingdom, either in time or space, are not easy to determine from the scanty evidence. Since Brutus came to Britain, many kings and realms have come and gone. The partition under Locrine, Camber, and Albanac was only the first of many shifting divisions. Okay. What with the love of petty independence on the one hand, and on the other, the greed of kings for wider realms, the years were filled with swift alternations of war and peace, of mirth and woe. As historians of the reign of King of Arthur tell us, a time of unsettled frontiers, which men might rise and fall suddenly, and songwriters had abundant material and eager audiences. Somewhere in those long years, after the days of King Cole, C-O-E-L, I think that's pronounced Cole, maybe, but before Arthur or the Seven Kingdoms of England. We must place the events here related. So between those two events, I get. And their scene is the valley of the Thames, which, with an excursion northwest to the walls of Wales. The capital of the Little Kingdom, I'm going to try and get this book to stay open, there we go. The capital of the Little Kingdom was evidently, as is ours, in its southeast corner, but its confines are vague. It seems never to have reached far up the Thames into the west, nor beyond Otmore to the north. Its eastern borders are dubious. There are indications in a fragmentary legend of Georgius, son of Giles, and his page Suetarius, or Sweat. That's a lot easier to say. That at one time an outpost against the Middle Kingdom was maintained at Farthingale. But that situation does not concern the story, which is now presently without alteration or further comment, though the original grandiose title has been suitably reduced to Farmer Giles of Ham. Okay. And it's time to get started, I guess. And we have a blank page, and we have Farmer Giles. I guess he is a farmer, since they call him Farmer Giles. It all makes perfect sense. 2 + 2 = 4, and all that stuff. Okay. Okay. I'm going to pronounce this the best I can, but this is going to be a little bit... Aegidius de Hamo was a man who lived in the midmost point of the island of Britain. In full, his name was Aegidius Ahenobarbus Julius Agricola de Hamo. For people were richly endowed with names in those days. How long ago, when this island was still happily divided into many kingdoms. Okay, so he has a really long name, which I think is awesome. Kingdoms, yeah, here we go. That's okay. There was more time then, and folk were fewer, so that most people were distinguished. However, those days are now over, and I will, in what follows, give the man a name shortly, and in the vulgar form. He was Farmer Giles of Ham, and he had a red beard. Ham was only a village, but the villages were proud and independent, still in those days. Farmer Giles had a dog. The dog's name was Garm. Dogs had to be content with short names in the vernacular. The book Latin was preserved for their betters. Garm could not talk even dog Latin, but he could use the vulgar tongue, as could most dogs of his day, either to bully or to brag or to wheedle in. Bullying was for beggars and trespassers, bragging for other dogs, and wheedling for his master. Garm was both proud and afraid of Giles, who could bully and brag better than he could. So there's the dogs. Garm. I like that name. That's a good name for a dog, Garm. The time was not one of hurry or bustle, but bustle had very little to do with business. Men did their work without it, and they got through a deal both of work and of talk. There was plenty to talk about, for memorable events occurred very frequently, but at the moment when this tale begins, nothing memorable had in fact happened in Ham for quite a long time, which suited Farmer Giles down to the ground. He was a slow sort of fellow, rather set in his ways, and taken up with his own affairs. He had his hands full, he said, keeping the wolf from the door. That is, keeping himself as fat and comfortable as his father before him. The dog was busy helping him. Neither of them gave much thought to the wide world outside their fields, the village and the nearest market. But The wide world was there, the forests were not far off, and away west and north were the wild hills, and the dubious marches of the mountain country, and among those things still at large there were giants, rude and uncultured folk, and troublesome at times. There was one giant in particular, larger than most, larger and more stupid than his fellows. I find no mention of his name in the histories, but it does not matter. He was very large. He was large, his walking stick like a tree, and his tread very heavy. He brushed elms aside like tall grasses, and he was the ruin of roads and the desolation of gardens. For his great feet made holes in them as deep as wells. If he stumbled into a house, that was the... Oh, there's the giant. That was the end of it. And all this damage he did whenever he went... and all this damage he did wherever he went, for his head was far above the roofs of houses, and left his feet to look after themselves. He was nearsighted and also rather deaf. Fortunately, he lived far off in the wild, and seldom visited the lands inhabited by men, at least not on purpose. He had a great tumble-down house away up in the mountains, but he had very few friends, owing to his deafness and his stupidity, and the scarcity of giants. He used to go out walking in the wild hills and in the empty regions at the feet of the mountains, all by himself. One fine summer's day, this giant went out for a walk and wandered aimlessly along, doing a great deal of damage in the woods. Suddenly, he noticed that the sun was setting and felt that his supper time was drawing near. But he discovered that he was in a part of the country that he did not know at all, and he had lost his way, making a wrong guess at the right direction. He walked and he walked until it was dark night. Then he sat down and waited for the moon to rise. Then he walked and walked in the moonlight, striding out with a will, for he was anxious to get home. He had left his best copper pot on the fire and feared that the bottom would be burned. But his back was to the mountains, and he was already in the lands inhabited by men. He was indeed now drawing near to the farm of Aegidius Ahenbarbus Julius Argicola, and the village called, in the vulgar tongue, Ham. It was a fine night. The cows were in the fields, and Farmer Giles's dog had got out and gone for a walk on his own account. He had a fancy for moonshine and rabbits. He had no idea, of course, that a giant was also out for a walk, and would have given him a good reason for going out without leave, but a still better reason for staying quiet in the kitchen. At about 2 o'clock, the giant arrived in Farmer Giles's field, broke the hedges, trampled on the crops, and flattened the mowing grass. In 5 minutes, he had done more damage than the royal fox hunt could have done in 5 days. Garm heard a thump-thump coming along the river bank, and he ran to the west side of the low. Okay, wait. Yeah, here we go. There we go. The low hill on which the farmhouse stood, just to see what was happening. Suddenly, he saw the giant stride right along the river and tread upon... oh boy. On Galathea, the farmer's favorite cow, squashing the poor beast as flat as the farmer could have squashed a black beetle. This was more than enough for Garm. He gave a yelp of fright and bolted home, quite forgetting that he was out without leave. He came and barked and yammered underneath his master's bedroom window. There was no answer for a long time. Farmer Giles was not easily wakened. "Help! Help! Help!" cried Garm. The window opened suddenly, and a well-aimed bottle came flying out. "Ow!" said the dog, jumping aside with practiced skill. "Help! Help! Help!" Out popped the farmer's head. "Drat you, dog! What be you a-doing?" he said. "Nothing," said the dog. "I'll give you nothing. I'll flay the skin off you in the morning," said the farmer, slamming the window. "Help! Help! Help!" cried the dog. Out came Giles' head again. "I'll kill you if you make another sound," he said. "What's come to you, you fool?" "Nothing," said the dog, "but something's come to you." "What did you mean?" said Giles, startled in the midst of his rage. Never before had Garm answered him saucily. "There's a giant in your field, an enormous giant, and he's coming this way," said the dog. "Help! Help! He is trampling on your sheep. He has stamped on poor Galathea, and she is as flat as a doormat. Help! 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 He's bursting all your hedges, and he's crushing all your crops. You must be bold and quick, master, or you will soon have nothing left. Help!" Garm began to howl. Okay. "Shut up," said the farmer, and he shut the window. "Lord of mercy," he said to himself, as though the night was warm. Although the night was warm, he shivered and shook. "Get back to bed and don't be a fool," said his wife, "and drown that dog in the morning." There is no call to believe what a dog says. They'll tell any tale when caught truant or thieving. "Maybe, Agatha," he said, "and maybe not, but there's something going on in my field, or Garm's a rabbit. The dog was frightened, and why should he come yammering in the night when he could be sneaking in at the back door with the milk in the morning?" Don't stand there arguing," she said. "If you believe the dog, then take his advice. Be bold and quick." "Easier said than done," answered Giles, for indeed he believed quite half of Garm's tale. In the small hours of the night, giants seemed less unlikely. Still, property is property, and Farmer Giles had a short way with trespassers, and that few could outface. So he put on his breeches and went down into the kitchen and took his blunderbuss from the wall. Some may ask what a blunderbuss was. Indeed, this very question is said was put to the 4 wise clerks of Oxenford, and after thought they replied, "A blunderbuss is a short gun with a long bore, firing many balls or slugs, and capable of doing execution within a limited range, without exact aim, now superseded in civilized countries by other firearms." However, Farmer Giles' blunderbuss had a wide mouth that opened like a horn, and it did not fire balls or slugs or anything that he could spare to stuff in it. And it did not do execution because he... Okay, let's find out. There we go. Let me check and make sure. Because he seldom loaded it and never let it off. The sight of it was usually enough for his purpose, and this country was not yet civilized, for the blunderbuss was not superseded. It was indeed the only kind of gun that there was, and rare at that. People preferred bows and arrows and used gunpowder mostly for fireworks. Well then, Farmer Giles took down his blunderbuss, and he put in a good charge of powder, just in case extreme measures should be required, and into the wide mouth he stuffed old nails and bits of wire, pieces of broken pots, bones and stones and other rubbish. Then he drew on his top boots and his overcoat, and he went out through the kitchen garden. The moon was low behind him, and he could see nothing worse than the long black shadow of bushes and trees, but he could hear a dreadful stamping, stumping coming from the side of the hill. He did not feel either bold or quick, whatever Agatha might say, but he was more anxious about his property than his skin. So, feeling a bit loose about the belt, he walked towards the brow of the hill. Suddenly, up over the edge of it, the giant's face appeared, pale in the moonlight, which glittered in his large, round eyes. His feet were still far below, making holes in the field. The moon dazzled the giant, and he did not see the farmer. But Farmer Giles saw him, and was scared out of his wits. He pulled the trigger without thinking, and the blunderbuss went off with a staggering bang. By luck, it was pointed more or less at the giant's large, ugly face. Out flew the rubbish and the stones and the bones and the bits of crock and wire and half a dozen nails. And since the range was indeed limited by chance, and no chance of the farmer's, many of these things struck the giant. A piece of pot went into his eye, and a large nail stuck in his nose. "Blast," said the giant, in his vulgar fashion. "I'm stung." The noise had made no impression on him. He was rather deaf, but he did not like the nail. It was a long time since he had met any insect fierce enough to pierce his thick skin, but he had heard tell that away east in the fens there were dragonflies that could bite like hot pincers. He thought that he must have run into something of that kind. "Nasty and healthy parts, evidently," he said. "I shan't go further this way tonight." So he picked up a couple of sheep off the hillside to eat when he got home, and went back over the river, making off about northwest at a good pace. He found his way back home again in the end, for he was at last going the right direction. But the bottom was burned off his copper pot. As for Farmer Giles, with the blunderbuss, when the blunderbuss went off, it knocked him over flat on his back, and, well, let's find out what happened. There's people celebrating. And there he lay, looking at the sky and wondering if the giant's feet would miss him as they passed by, but nothing happened. And the stumping died away in the distance. So he got up, rubbed his shoulder, and picked up his blunderbuss. Then suddenly he heard the sound of people cheering. Most of the people of Ham had been looking out of their windows. A few had put on their clothes and come out after the giant had gone away. Some were now running up the hill shouting. The villagers had heard the horrible thump of the giant's feet, and most of them had immediately gone under the bedclothes. Some had even got under the beds. But Garm was both proud and frightened of his master. Excuse me. He thought him terrible and splendid when he was angry, and he naturally thought that any giant would think the same. So as soon as he saw Giles come out with the blunderbuss, a sign of great wrath as a rule, he rushed off to the village barking and crying, "Come out, come out, come out, get up, come out, come and see the great master, my great master. He is bold and quick, and he's going to shoot a giant for trespassing. Come on." The top of the hill could be seen from most of the houses. When the people and the dog saw the giant's face rise above it, they quailed and held their breath, and all but the dog among them thought that this should prove a matter too big for Giles to deal with. Then the blunderbuss went bang, and the giant turned suddenly and went away. And in their amazement and their joy, they clapped and cheered, and Garm nearly barked his head off. "Hooray!" they shouted. That will learn him. Master Aegidius had given him what for. Now he will go home and die and serve him right and proper. Then they all cheered again together, but even as they cheered, they took note, for their own profit, that after all this blunderbuss could really be fired. There had been some debate in the village. MNS. I don't know what that means. MNS. Oh. The village MNS to this point. And now the matter was settled. Farmer Giles had little trouble with trespassers after that. When all seemed safe, some of the bolder folk came right up the hill and shook hands with Farmer Giles. A few, the parson and the blacksmith, maybe? Blacksmith and the miller and one or two other persons of importance slapped him on the back. That did not please him. His shoulders were very sore. But he felt obliged to invite them into his house. They sat around in the kitchen, drinking his health, and loudly praising him. He made no effort to hide his yawns, but as long as the drink lasted, they took no notice. By the time they had all had one or two, and the farmer 2 or 3, he began to feel quite bold. When they had all had 2 or 3, and he had 5 or 6, he felt as bold as his dog thought him. They parted good friends, and he slapped their backs heartily. His hands were large, red, and thick, so he had his revenge. Next day he found that the news had grown in the telling, and he had become an important local figure. By the middle of the next week, the news had spread to all the villages within 20 miles. He had become the hero of the countryside. Very, very pleasant, he found it. Next market day, he got enough free drink to float a boat. That is to say, he nearly had his fill, and came home singing old heroic songs. At last, even the king got to hear it, the capital of the realm. The capital of that realm. The middle kingdom of the island, in those happy days, was some 20 leagues distance from Ham, and they paid little heed at court as I guess that's the king. That's the people drinking. Okay. Court as a rule to the doings of rustics in the provinces, but so prompt an expulsion of a giant is injurious. 84 seemed worthy of note, and of some little courtesy. So, in due course, that is, in about 3 months, and on the feast of St. Michael, the king sent a magnificent letter. It was written in red upon white parchment, and expressed the royal approbation of our loyal subject and well-beloved Aegidius Ahenobarbus Julius Agricola de Hamo. The letter was signed with a red blot, but the court scribe had added, that is Latin, by the way, and I can't read that, with a large red seal, and a large red seal was attached, so the document was plainly genuine. It afforded great pleasure to Giles, and was very admired, especially when it was discovered that one could get a seat and a drink by the farmer's fire for asking to look at it. Okay, we're going to stop this right here and pick this up. We've learned a little bit about Farmer Giles, and so yeah. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.